little flustered today. It's not because it's St. Patrick's Day and I've had a Guinness for breakfast, but I don't know. I just taught for 90 minutes, so bear with me today. Questions? We ready? I don't have anything to talk about except for economics, which is always my favorite topic. All right, let's do it. By the way, my son came to my office to go play with the Lego in my office, and he walked in and saw that poster you guys did, and he was like, Dada, I'm famous. So thank you very much again. You've not only made me very happy, but my son's very happy too. My wife asked why she isn't in the picture, but that's a different story. Okay, so let's think about what we're doing, all right? We're deep in the land of production. I think we're going to have to manufacture a new desk here. But what we're worried about is how do we go from producing, let's say, 100 units to 200 units? The question I told you to always ask when you're contemplating this is, are we expanding production in the long run or in the short run? In the short run, of course, our capital is fixed, right? We can't just add more capital. We're stuck with the amount of capital we have, so the only way to produce more is by adding more labor. That means in the short run, our expansion path in the labor capital space, where capital is on the y-axis and labor is on the x-axis, is simply a horizontal line at the level of capital that we have. In the long run, you can expand production by producing all inputs, both labor and capital. That means that as you go from the 100 unit isoquant to the 200 unit isoquant, you're not stuck on that horizontal line where your short run level of capital is, but you can go anywhere. And the anywhere you would go is you would go to the point on the 200 unit isoquant where your isocost curve is tangent to that isoquant, right? It's the lowest possible isocost curve you can get onto and still produce 200 units. What that left us with is a short run expansion path that is horizontal and a long run expansion path that is like this sort of snaky upward sloping line here if you have a Cobb-Douglas production function. Then we talked a little bit about cost curves and why they have the shape they do. In the short run, we discussed that short run cost curves are U-shaped initially because average fixed costs drop off very quickly and then start being upward sloping because of the diminishing marginal and average product of labor. In the long run, the shape of the cost curve simply depends not on average fixed costs, because there are no fixed costs in the long run, but rather they depend on what returns to scale your production function displays. So if you have a U-shaped long run cost curve, that means you have increasing returns to scale initially and then decreasing returns to scale thereafter. By the way, there's no reason to sit in the windows unless you like it there. Lots and lots of seats. Be a good day for a quiz today. Right? Okay, and then I tried to cram the profit maximization in there in the end, where we know the objective of these profit maximizing firms is profit maximization, because they're profit maximizing firms. We're not dealing with non-profit maximizing firms here. So what I gave you last time is this profit curve, and that's where we'll pick up here, and about halfway through lecture today, you will actually understand where that profit curve comes from, since last time I simply asked you to trust me when I talked about this profit curve. Never trust an economist, ever. I'm kidding. How can you not trust this face, right? All right. So what we said last time, this here is profit, this here is output, right? My profit curve looks something like this, and we said at the profit maximizing point right here, the change in profit over the change in quantity is 0. If we're down here somewhere, the change in profit due to the change in quantity is less than 0. So if you're to the right of the profit maximizing point, then you increase output, your profits fall. If you're to the left here, that's terrible. Try that again. If you're to the left here somewhere, I don't know if that's any better, but right down here, the change in profit due to the change in quantity is greater than 0. This is a terrible drawing. Let me walk you through it one more time, because this is really important. Right, so the profit maximizing quantity is the quantity where profits are maximizing, meaning the highest point of the profit curve. So Q star right here is the output level that maximizes profits, the top point on that profit curve. At that same point right here, because it's flat at that point, the change in profits due to a change in quantity is exactly 0. If you're producing less than that, right, if you're somewhere, let's say here, if you increase quantity, your profits would go up. So why wouldn't you do that? Exactly, you would do that, right? So you would just migrate up the profit curve until your profits can't get any higher. You wouldn't go to the right of optimal quantity because your profits would drop. So at the single profit maximizing output level, right, the change in profit due to a change in quantity is 0. So this is, how I made you sort of memorize the marginal rate of substitution is equal to the marginal rate of, is equal to the price ratio or marginal rate of transformation. So here we're doing a similar thing. You choose the optimal output level where profits are maximized. Another way of saying the same thing is where marginal profit is 0 or marginal revenue equals marginal cost, right? And this is where I finished last time. You should never shove math in the last two seconds of lecture. Just a quick refresher here where that thing comes from, right? It came from this. At profit maximization, the change in profit due to the change in quantity is 0. So this thing is 0, but I can rewrite profit as, well, I know profit is total cost minus total revenue divided by the change in quantity. Or, remembering high school was terrible, but the math was good. We could write it like this. Right, so the change in profit is simply the change in total cost minus total revenue, because that's what profit is. And I can rewrite that as the change in total cost due to the change in quantity minus the change in total revenue due to the change in quantity. So the change in total cost due to the change in quantity, that's marginal cost. And the change in total revenue due to the change in quantity, that's something we haven't used before, but I'm going to call this marginal revenue, which will get the amazingly intuitive acronym MR for marginal revenue. Okay? Marginal revenue is simply how many additional dollars do you take in if you sell one more unit. If price is constant, right, if you don't affect price, each time you sell a unit, you get P dollars. So if you as a firm can't affect price, then marginal revenue is simply price, right? The number of dollars you get per unit. However, if you're a firm that's big enough that each time you sell a unit, you actually change the price, then this gets more complicated. We'll talk about that when we talk about monopolies and monopolistic competition and things like that, all right? But the point here now is that this is equal to 0. So if we rewrite this, our giant finding here, to maximize profit, where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Right, so the profit maximizing firm chooses output such that marginal cost, meaning the cost of the last unit produced, is exactly equal to the amount of money that it gets for producing that last unit. So let's add some intuition, right? Intuition is important because memorization without intuition just turns into forgotten memories, right? So let's build some intuition here. So you're a firm, and I'm telling you, you can get $10 for a good that would cost you for the next unit. If you sold one more unit, you would get $10 for it, but it would only cost you $8 to make that unit. Should you produce that good? Yeah, right? 10 minus 8, 2. I'm taking those $2 and I'm buying myself a quarter of a latte. So what if I told you, well, you can sell one more good, you get $10 for it, but it would cost you $12 to produce that good. Should you produce it? No, right? Silly. So if marginal cost is less than marginal revenue, you should amp up production. If marginal cost is more than marginal revenue, you should decrease production. So you will get to the point where you're maximizing profits, or where your output decision comes to the point where if you produce one more unit, you could sell it for $10, it would cost you $10 to produce that unit. Should you produce it? You do the famous, kind of indifferent. Yeah, we might as well produce it. Somebody will consume it, it'll make them happy. But you're indifferent, right? So at profit maximization, and this is a huge result, right? So we've got a few things already tattooed onto our sleeve right here, but you should add this, right? So it's really painful right here, so maybe use the other arm. So the point here is, at profit maximization, a profit maximizing firm will choose output such that marginal cost equals marginal revenue, okay? You've got to remember that for the rest of time. Very important. Okay, so that's the first step that we've decided, and this is big, this is huge, right? We've been worried about what input composition do I use with what input prices. Well, Max, who cares about input combination? I want to know how much we should produce. We know now. This is amazing. Was sort of anticlimactic, but it's pretty good. We now know how much to produce, and we know what input combination we should use to produce it. Because once I know what isoquant I'm on, that's Q star, then I just look at my isocost line and figure out what the tendency is, and I know what the optimal input combination is. Done. Well, there's one more little wrinkle. I said the firm has to decide two things. It has to decide, should it produce Q star at all, right? So I know what the most money is that I can possibly make, but what if that profit amount is actually negative, right? What if I'm losing money at Q star? Should I produce Q star, or should I shut down production completely and not produce at all? While it seems sort of obvious to you, maybe intuitively, that producing not at all when you're losing money seems to be the obvious idea, I have a surprise for you. Not necessarily true, right? There are settings where shutting down production is actually more costly than producing and losing money. So let's look at this for a second, okay? So when should a firm stop producing? We're going to call this the shutdown rule. The shutdown rule is pretty simple. A firm should stop producing if it can reduce its loss by doing so. So if a firm loses more money by shutting down than producing, it shouldn't shut down. If the firm loses more money producing than it does shutting down, it should shut down. This strikes me as pretty obvious, right? It is to you too. You guys don't look too excited today. I know this stuff is snoozy, but we're about to leave Snoozeville. Oh, that's what's German, Snoozeville, and head over to the exciting land of market failures. But we got to get through this stuff. It's a little bit boring, but that's okay. I'll try and tell lots of stupid jokes so you're at least partially entertained. So a firm shuts down if its revenue is less than its avoidable costs. This is what you'll read in the textbook. And that was never really intuitive to me what that means. Let me give you the intuition, then let me give you some examples, and then hopefully we agree that, as always, Max is right, okay? So what I'm going to argue here is, let's say you have capital costs, okay? In the short run, you have to pay your capital costs, even if you shut down. You have a fixed level of capital, you have to pay for the capital, you have no choice but to do so. So if in the short run, you actually go out and hire some labor and you produce your optimal output level, right? And the amount of money you take in from selling that optimal output level is actually greater than just the labor cost that it takes to produce that output level, what are you going to do with the rest of that money? You're going to pay off some of your capital bill, right? So even if you're losing money, right, and you've got your capital bill right here, if you're producing output and you're still losing money, but if you can, by selling your product, get more money in than it costs you to just pay your labor bill, you can take whatever's left over and pay for some of the capital. Versus if you shut down and you don't hire any labor and you don't have any revenue, then you're stuck with the whole capital bill, which is bigger than if you had produced and used some of that additional income that's more than the labor cost to pay off your capital. That's the intuition here, right? So a firm shuts down only if its revenue is less than its avoidable variable cost. So if you take in less money or exactly the same amount of money that it costs you to pay your labor, you should shut down, right? Because then you're hiring labor, you're getting revenue, you're taking in less money than it costs you to even pay the labor to do it, so then you're losing money on labor and capital. But if you're taking in more money than your labor bill, then you can take some of that and pay off your capital cost. I'm repeating myself too frequently, but yeah. So I didn't understand a word of what you just said, Max. Give me some numbers. Okay. Let's think of a firm that is better off producing. Remember, we're in the short run. How can I tell that I'm in the short run? Well, Max just said so. But just by the setup, even if it doesn't say short run, how do I know I'm in the short run? There are fixed costs. You guys are on fire. I like it. So fixed costs here, $300. There are fixed costs I'm in the short run because in the long run there are no fixed costs. If that firm produces, its variable costs would be $100. Its revenue would be $200. So if this firm actually produces, it takes in $200, right? So that's total revenue, minus its variable costs, minus its fixed costs. Right? So I take in $200, I pay $100 in labor costs to produce that output level, plus I'm paying $300 in capital costs, I lose $200. Am I happy? No. Okay? I'm losing money. But if your Stanford consultant comes in and will say, well, you fool, you should have shut down production, you do the following. Well, dear Stanford friend, if I don't produce, I don't get any revenue, $0. I also don't have any labor costs. But I still have to pay my capital. Right? So I lose $300. So here, the firm should not shut down, which it says in the title, but I just feel like writing today. Okay? The firm should not shut down. This is a nice example, but can we use the rule that I had on this bullet point a second ago? The firm should shut down if its revenues are less than its labor costs or its variable costs. So revenue is $200. Labor costs are $100. So labor costs are less than revenues, or revenues are greater than variable costs. And if we go back for a second here, a firm shuts down only if its revenue is less than its variable costs. Here, revenue is greater than its variable costs, right? You're paying off your labor and then you have some money left over to pay towards capital. So here, I can use my shutdown rule, and I wouldn't have to do all this crazy math right here. I could just look at revenue versus variable costs. Since revenue is greater than variable costs, this firm shouldn't shut down in the short run. What does a firm look like that should shut down? Well, let's do the step-by-step thing, and then let's use our rule, right? So if the firm operates, it gets $50 in total revenue. Its variable costs are $100, and its fixed costs are $300. So 50 minus 400 is minus 350. If the firm shuts down, it has $0 in revenues, $0 in variable costs and $300 in fixed costs. So this firm loses $300 if it shuts down, but loses $350 if it operates. So this firm in the short run is clearly better off shutting down. Did I have to go through all this crazy math? It's not really crazy math. I think Noah could do this one. Not really. But the point here is I don't have to do that. I can just look at revenue and variable costs. Since revenue is less than variable costs, this firm should shut down. Okay? So in summary, what I've been trying to say here is the following. The firm, when it decides on how much output to produce, has to make two decisions. Right? First, figure out what Q star is. Right? Figure out the optimal output quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Check. Figure out Q star. And then figure out at that Q star, should that firm actually operate or should it shut down? And that decision is made by checking whether total revenue is less than variable cost. If total revenue is less than variable cost, the firm shuts down. Okay. So, of course, Max says these things 100 times, and then he has these annoying slides that say the same thing 100 times. I have some very good friends in marketing. In the Haas Business School, really smart people. They're very good at selling you stuff. You have no idea how good they are at selling you stuff. The new advent of cameras everywhere lets you do things like in Bloomingdale's, they can randomly place stuff in the stores in different Bloomingdale's across the country, and then the cameras track how much time you spend at which facet of the exhibit, and they do essentially random assignment of these things across stores. I'm just picking Bloomingdale's. It's actually not Bloomingdale's. But they look at patterns of where people spend how much time in front of which exhibits, and that's how they maximize where to put these exhibits in the stores, because they also know when you pick up one and you go to buy it. So marketers, the old marketing, oh, people like vitamins, we should put some vitamins in an ad. It's so over, right? This is the time of big data. They put people in MRIs, see what part of your brain lights up. I mean, it's really quite amazing. But why are you talking about marketing, Max? The reason I'm talking about marketing is what marketers know, you have to hear a message 7 times, preferably in 7 different ways for you to remember what was said, right? So I'm not trying to be overly annoying, but I'm taking a lesson from the marketers. The important things I say many times until they sink in. And given your performance on midterm 1, that strategy seems to be working, or you're an exceptionally smart cohort. Those are the 2 explanations I have. Stop flattering your class, Max. They'll tank midterm 2. You can go back to the iTunes thing. I don't flatter every class, okay? So the shutdown rule. When does a firm stop producing? You stop producing if you reduce your loss by doing so, or if revenue is less than variable cost. My favorite way of putting it is revenue is less than variable cost. Now, what this, of course, means is that in the short run, a firm could be really well off, could be the best version of itself, and actually still make a loss, right? So it could be optimal for the firm to operate and make a loss. Negative profits in the short run are possible. In the long run, and this is a check for your intuition, my shutdown rule works in the short and in the long run. Would it ever be possible for a firm to operate with a negative profit in the long run? No, right? The reason is total costs are total variable costs in the long run, right? So if revenue is less than variable costs, you're making a negative profit. So the shutdown rule in the long run means that if you make negative profits in the long run, you should shut down, right? It's pretty easy because there's not this fixed cost thing where you take in some money, you pay up your labor, and then pay some towards capital. In the long run, all costs are variable. So if total revenue is less than total variable costs, meaning your profits are negative, you shut down. Okay, nice check of intuition. All right, let's move into unicorn country, okay? What do I mean by unicorn country? Let's talk about perfect competition for a moment. The perfectly competitive market. 'Tis the promised land, right? It is not. So what I'm going to talk about is firms in different environments, right? So think of firms operating in different types of markets. So the most famous and maybe most rare form of a market is the perfectly competitive market. The perfectly competitive market is one where consumers believe that all firms sell identical products, okay? So the market for wheat, for example, you could think of a perfectly competitive market because wheat is wheat. Well, if you're from wheat country, you clearly know that wheat is not equal to wheat. There's organic wheat, there's different grades of wheat, there's different size kernels, there's all kinds of different grades of it. But for a specific type of wheat, each individual farmer produces the same type of wheat, and consumers can't distinguish between the different types of wheat, right? So you can think of often for certain types of goods, we classify them as a grade or something like that, and then it's an identical product. So if you're not vegetarian and you ate in your high school cafeteria, you got served grade C hamburger meat, right? Grade C hamburger meat is just a standardized product of something that you probably shouldn't be eating, but it's served everywhere. It's a homogeneous type quality product, and you can't tell one cow from another, even though it comes from different cows, obviously, right? So consumers believe that all firms sell identical products. Where is this not the case? Cell phones, right? Apple sells the iPhone. Mine's today covered in strawberry jam because that's what it was for breakfast. The Android type phone, I don't know Android phones, name a brand. Samsung, right? It's a totally different phone, right? Those of you who have Android phones chose them for a reason. It's a different product. So we're talking about a competitive market where products are identical. Even the market for pens, right? Products are differentiated. A Uniball pen is very different from a Pilot pen, and so on. So that's not competitive. Their firms get to differentiate their product. Second characteristic is firms can freely enter and exit. You can enter or leave the market at will. This is not true in power plant production, like we discussed last time. Third, buyers and